Good evening and welcome to Wisdom Wednesday. You guys, it's Masonber. I am so sorry that I missed last week, especially on such short notice, but I'm here tonight. And it's been a really long last few weeks. Our oldest just got back from a year abroad in Spain, and she got back Monday and she's leaving Sunday to head down to Tennessee for an internship. So we've just had a really, really busy season. We're in the middle of end of year recitals and projects and concerts and performances and everything everywhere all the time. So I'm back. And it's Wednesday night midweek, and I didn't get any chance to even contemplate what I was going to come with this evening. And I told my husband that we needed to pray about something else, and he made a suggestion. And it was exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, I preached a word at my home church, and I entitled it Keep Talking. And I did that for a couple of reasons. The first being I was talking to mothers. I was talking to parents. I was talking to people who are in a position of authority over young people, over children, and who find themselves, for whatever reason, feeling as though they don't have anything to give, or the words that they're saying are not being heard, or maybe, just maybe, it's better to let them learn on their own. Um, Growing up, I heard hard head makes a soft behind, or imu don here gon feel. What that really means is if you do not listen, life will teach you and life will humble you in really painful ways. And as parents, we do want to save our children that, but there are times in our lives where we stop talking, where we get quiet, where we're not willing to give the lessons. And I came tonight to talk a little bit about that. And guys, if this is your first time catching one of my lives, my name is Naomi. I go by the How To Chick, and I'm a child of God, a wife, a mom, an attorney, a coach, a mentor, and a speaker. But most importantly, I believe you can do anything, but you cannot do everything, and you must choose wisely. And I come on Wednesday nights to talk about a little bit about love, a little bit about life, but mostly about the relationships that we have in our lives, primarily the relationship we have with ourselves and the relationship that we have with God, and how those relationships and stability in those relationships can really change our lives for better or for worse. I preached this word on Mother's Day about talking, and as I was preparing it, I had no idea what I was going to say. I had a text, and there's a text in Deuteronomy that I love, and it talks about talking to your children, about teaching them the ways of God, about telling them about the victories that God has won when you come and when you go. They're describing, right, how we get in our cars and we drive. And back then they were walking and they were going to the market and they were going to Passover. And they were talking about the time that you have in which you can have these conversations. You have a captive audience. You have nothing but time and space and opportunity. And so many times in those spaces are the times that we want and desire. And I'm just speaking for me here. But when I am driving in a car with my children after a long day, the last thing I want to do is hear a lot of noise or have a lot of conversations. I want quiet. And my message was entitled Keep Talking because I recognize that so many times we get quiet as parents. We get quiet when our children get a little older because we recognize that our children have learned more by what we have done than they could ever learn from what we say. We get quiet because we start seeing things in them that we know come directly from things in us, and we don't feel confident to parent it out of them without humbling ourselves. We get quiet because life is exhausting and we're tired. And we're tired of repeating ourselves, and we're tired of feeling unheard, and we're tired of feeling as though what we're saying is falling on deaf ears. And I was lamenting almost that exact thing to my husband this evening. And I was reminded of a conversation I had with my mom when I was about 21, 22, maybe 23. I think I was 23. And my mom and I had gone out to brunch. I had taken her out to brunch. She was visiting me, and I had a big girl job, so I wanted to show off and take her out, and we were sitting and we were talking, and I said, "How come you never talk to me about the guys I'm dating, about my relationships?" Like, my mom never said anything, and your parents' body language. You know when they like or don't like someone you're dating, and my mother was good with her body language. So I knew that, a couple of the guys that I dated, she was not big fans of, right? But she never said anything. And I would ask her, I'd be like, so I'm coming and I'm bringing so and so. What do you think? Or, so, I'm going to go meet so and so's parents. What do you think? She would just say, oh, have a good time. Oh, okay. I'll see you when you get here. Oh, okay. She never would give me an opinion, an answer, a position, and it was frustrating for me. So I remember I'm about 23 and she's come to visit me in Atlanta, and I'm taking her out for brunch and we're sitting there, and I say, "Why don't you ever talk to me about my relationships? Why don't you talk to me about, the people I'm dating and give me feedback?" Because, I would listen. Just, my mom is a divorcee. And, I think, I don't know, because we never got to this part, but I felt like she just didn't wanna talk about relationships, like she didn't feel like she had an opinion that was valid because she was a divorcee. So I'm like, "Listen, I understand that, but what I'm saying is you're an adult. You've seen more, you've been through more, you've dealt with more people. Give me some feedback. I need some guidance." And this is a 23-year-old telling, my mom, "Can you please, open your mouth?" And I very literally said that, and I said, "Look, there's this other guy that I'm thinking about dating," and she knew him, he was a friend of mine. Well, he's my husband now. And I said to her, I said, "Tell me what you think about him." And she looked at me and she was like, "Well," and I said, "I want you to tell me the truth." And she looked at me and she said, "You're right. I didn't like so and so, and I didn't like such and such, and I didn't like the way they did this and the way they did that." And she didn't go on and on because those relationships were over. She had her opinion. She gave it in a few seconds, and she looked at me and she said, "I really like him." Talking about my husband. "I think you should date him." And that was enough. I was willing to listen. And I remember that so vividly because I know now what I didn't know then, and that is she was looking at me in the spaces where I was dating so and so and such and such, and she was seeing how emotionally tied I was to them and recognizing that her opinion probably wouldn't have that much value. But what she didn't recognize about me is that I've always valued the opinions of my elders. I've taken it into account. I've made friends with older people because I am one who likes to learn from other people's mistakes. Now, not every child is like that, and you got to know your child. Some of them just really want to feel. And, I mean, it's hard. It's hard, especially when that feeling involves rescue and your pocketbook. But you got to know your child. But most importantly, you have to keep talking, because how will you know if you don't ask? How will they know if you don't tell them? And that came back to mind tonight because there are some things that I've had to talk to my oldest about several times, and I got really frustrated and I got really annoyed, and I was like, "I know that we've had these conversations. Why am I having to repeat this?" And I had to I had to really remember, as mature as I thought I was and did think I was completely grown, um, I was not so mature that I was willing to take even the best meant and actually correct advice that I received when it went against what I wanted in my heart in that moment. And so what I was reminded of was the difference between me at 23 and 17 or 18 or 19. And that was my spiritual walk. That was my walk in healing. I had not just developed my personal relationship with Christ. I had not just done a couple of years in therapy at that point. I had become invested in becoming a better version of myself. And that was not of my own. That was through wisdom and guidance from my godmother and others who recognized that I was in a space where I was vulnerable and I had a lot of decisions to make and I needed guidance in that space. And I had The Bible says there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. I had many counselors other than my mother that I was listening to, but I did value her advice. And I had to kind of pep talk myself up to that today because I know that there are spaces and places that parents we feel undervalued, we feel unwanted, we feel like there's no point in speaking, that we're wasting our words. But I want to encourage you that the words aren't not wasted. They may not feel as though they are making an impact in that moment. Some of us believe that we are growing chia pets and we are really growing sycamore trees. They get buried low and long and deep, and we may not see the fruits of our labor for many years, but we have to keep talking. And if we're not talking at them, but instead having conversation with them, talking to them, listening to them, we will see the fruits. But it will take time. We have to be patient. I was reminded of that tonight, and I just wanted to encourage a mom tonight who is struggling with a teenager, because I got a couple of those too, or an adult child who seems like they are straying from the way you thought they were raised. Sometimes the conversations that have to be had now are a little different. Sometimes it has to involve more questions than answers. And many times it's going to involve far more biting your tongue than you ever thought you'd be comfortable doing. But our prayers still matter, our words still matter, and the relationship that we have with our children matters more than ever. So we must keep those lines of communication open, even when we're angry, even when we're annoyed, even when they have once again, caused a preventable mistake by failing to listen. Consequences are fine. Natural consequences are the best at this age. But we got to keep talking. We can't stop. We cannot give up, because when we give up, there is always someone willing to fill the gap. There's always someone willing to give them an opinion that will make them feel good. I love that story in the Old Testament, and I probably talk about this way too much. But this is when, if you don't know the Old Testament, I love the story of Elijah. Elijah is sent to Ahab and Jezebel to tell them there won't be rain because they have not been worshiping God. They've been worshiping Baal. But Elijah made a prophecy over Ahab that because Ahab had turned the people away from God, he had accepted the Baal, the idol that his wife Jezebel wanted the people to worship. And he had allowed them to worship Baal, to raise up high places to Baal, and to violate the things and the items, right, of the temple and the things that belong to God. Elijah made a prophecy that Ahab was going to die in battle and that his blood would be licked by dogs. So Ahab is being attacked by the Syrians, and he calls up the king of Israel, who comes over, and he says, hey, the king of Judah, who comes over, and he's like, hey, do you have a prophet we can inquire of before we go out to battle? And of course, Ahab assembles 400 of his prophets. That's still what they were called, whether or not they were God-fearing. And they're all saying, yes, go up, you're going to win, you're going to win, you're going to win. Everything's going to be great. And the king of Judah looks at him, and he knows very, very well that these people are not speaking the word of God. He said, do you not have another prophet of God that you can call? And here goes Ahab whining, I know, but I hate Micaiah. He never has anything good to say about me. He only speaks evil all the time. Of course, they bring Micaiah because the king of Judah was not going out to battle with him unless he got a word from the Lord. And Micaiah comes up and he says, yeah, you're going to win, but you, Ahab, are going to die. I'm sorry. He said they were going to lose and they were going to be scattered. He said, you, Ahab, are going to die, and you are going to be shot and you will be dead, and the dogs will lick your blood. That was the prophecy of Elijah. So Ahab gets into a fight with him. He's like, you're wrong. You're wrong. I know you're wrong. Now, mind you, how he would say that when everything Elijah said had come true is wild to me, but I'm on a tangent. But what I'm really saying is, when we keep these lines of communication open, our children will know, they will remember when they hear those words repeated to them. Ahab was not that wise. He was a very foolish king. He went out to battle anyway. He died. The prophecy was fulfilled. But long story short, when we speak, they know. And they may not seek us out because they know. They already know. The seed has been planted. They know. So they may not ask us because they know they think they know what we're going to say, or they may know what we're going to say. But if we build those relationships where we're asking questions and we're reminding them of the things we've told them, and we're not lecturing them or talking at them or trying to make their decisions through them, for them, or manipulate them into making the decisions we want them to make, but instead accepting that is uncomfortable for us as it may be. There are some things that they're going to have to learn themselves. We're going to ultimately build a strong relationship that will allow them to call us when they need that word. We're going to build a relationship that's going to mean that before they go out and do something that destroys their life, they will seek our counsel, or they will hear our voices in their heads. And the more vulnerable we are about the places that we've been, and this is a whole nother one, but I cannot fail to mention it. The more vulnerable we are about the places that we've been, the lessons that we've learned the hard way, the ways that we have messed up, and the ways that we have seen the mistake change our lives for better or for worse, the more they are going to trust and believe what we say, and the more we can prepare them for the things that will so easily beset them. Because, and I'm sorry guys, I went straight to Kings without giving you the disclaimer that is, as you have already figured out, I'm unapologetically a God girl. And what I'm really saying is, there are some things that pass down from generation to generation. There are some things they're dealing with because I dealt with it, because their grandfather dealt with it, because their great grandmother dealt with it. And if we're not honest with them about the places we've been, about that addiction, about that abortion, about that broken heart, about that wrecked vehicle, about that almost jail time for stealing, we're setting them up for failure. Because I didn't say this, the Bible said this: the sins of the father will pass down to the third and the fourth generation of them that hate him. And yes, God says he will show mercy to the first generation. But to break that chain, they still need to know. Because when they don't know, then they won't allow God to do the work in them that he had to do in us to get it out of us. They're not going to even recognize that they need the work done. We can't believe that having it end in our lives is enough to keep it from going on. That's why we have to talk about it, keep talking about it, keep praying about it. There are age-appropriate ways to talk about everything and at every age, but we have to understand that if we do not tell them, somebody else is going to be out there giving them the words they want to hear. Somebody else is going to be out there telling them thoughts that go contrary to what you want them to know and what the Word of God says. We have to keep talking, and we have to believe that the talking that we're doing are just seeds that we're planting. And I think it was Paul, but I could be wrong. He says one man plants, another man waters, and yet a third man will harvest. We don't know if we're always going to see the immediate results. Many times we won't, especially for things that we see in our children that we try to deal with when they're already teens or adults, because we were afraid to have those conversations earlier, or because we didn't want to expose the vulnerability that we saw in ourselves to them. But if we don't ever have the conversation, we are setting them up for failure. We are telling them that we value our privacy and our self-image more than we value your life and your salvation. Keep talking. Keep praying. Keep asking questions, and keep believing. Isaiah 49 says God promises that he will contend with those that it will contend with us, and he will save our children. We have to claim it. We have to receive it. We have to believe it, and we have to walk in faith like it has already been done. Keep talking. And remember, you can do anything, but you cannot do everything, and you must choose wisely. Have a wonderful evening. I am so glad that you came, and hope to see you again next week for Wisdom Wednesday. Good night.